Gray drizzle frets at the hall porch. Rushes are tacky with old ale and yesterday's certainty. Reeves test their excuses like fishermen test nets. Flex here, stretch there, pretend there aren't holes. The audit board squats beneath the treasurer's perch. The rail between the benches and the numbers has a bend where tempers tried to live last quarter. You're the newest chamber clerk on roll watch. Stake bag at your hip, a coil of hush cord in your fist, a tally stick and penknife tucked under your arm, a bag of pounce that smells like ground shell, a pot of red ochre that will make friends or enemies depending on your wrist. If you like watching numbers turn into quiet law without anyone having to draw steel, walk with me. Tap subscribe and ring the bell. We'll set a chord that makes listening matter and show how a dusty membrane does work a shout never could. Orders are plain because their consequences aren't. Peg a hush cord from audit board to benches. Hang the board, accounts, not arguments, where elbows have to read it to sit. Check the quit rent list. Post the rule, no blades near parchment. A reeve mutters that rolls lie. The treasurer, who keeps more patience than he admits, points his tally at a lord who dodged last llamas with a story about goats. Make the numbers speak, he says. You kneel and chalk the first line across the rushes. Peg taps, tap tap, turn, tap. The woolen hush cord draws a clean seam between tail and tally. Shallow arc where the rail kinks, straight run to the steward's knee. Cord too near and pride cheats, men lean and try to argue with ink. Cord too far and courage spills into noise, the roll becomes scenery. Either way the rule must be up before the hush horn's low note peals call names. You set pegs at ankle depth, seams not fences, and let the cord hum without singing. Rail, the sergeant grunts, palm already on a peg. He rams one home with a hand that has learned to measure without shouting. You plumb the audit rail, post to post, eye to chalk line, until the bend looks like intention rather than collapse. You stamp footing from the porch to the tally table so the first boot doesn't slip into apology. Then draw 2 chalk rings, 1 2 paces back for mouths that think volume is weight, 1 at the rail for hands that need somewhere to stop. The accounts, not arguments board hangs where cloaks must brush it. Beneath the big hand you write in a smaller one, measure kept equal to staff wrap, second wrap equal to mint, third equal to fine. Then, lower still, no blades near parchment. You paint the letters with red ochre thick enough to embarrass anyone who pretends they can't see it. A quill spits, ink blots a reeve's sleeve. You pass him the bread salt from your bag with 2 fingers, mouths argue less when bellies have a job, and make the hand sign for hold, flat palm, no theatrics. He reads it. He waits. The hush horn peals once, the treasurer's staff wraps the rail, measure keeps itself for a heartbeat. Hidden worlds live under your bracers. Last winter's barred distraints list, no seizing seed grain in frost, no distraint on a widow's only cow, no pulling a man off a plow in sowing week, a spare sack of bread salt for when arrears and hunger arrive together. Hand signs, 2 fingers down, step, flat palm, hold, fist low, down. Pocket drill for the mouth about to embarrass a spine, set feet, breathe, count. You chalk a quiet seam from door to board, ochre dots where story must pause and grammar begin. The steward leans in, you can feel his breath without hearing it. You tie a red thread on the first peg, arrears first or seeds spared first? Not today's question, yours for later. Call names, the hush horn says. The usher reads in a voice made of pounce and patience. Hugh of Lowcroft. A man in a damp cloak steps to the outer ring. Quit rent, hens and malt. A lord on the near bench adjusts his ring and prepares a goat. Your cord hand tightens. The treasurer's eye finds it and remains there long enough to give your knuckles manners. You tug the seam 1 thumb inward, firm here, then stand still. Rolls lie, the reeve mutters again, quieter. The treasurer lifts the split tally, 2 halves that agree like teeth. He kisses pounce over the first membrane. The dust eats grease so ink can bite. He reads, 2 hens owing, 1 paid, malt half bushel carried, amercement for late, 1 vinegar. The lord inhales to produce a pasture. Staff wrap, measure kept. You log it as it breathes, arrears, hens, 1, malt, 0.5, amercement, 1 vinegar, name, Hugh of Lowcroft. The chalk likes numbers, rushes like silence. You pace to the surety bench and chalk the boots that will stand behind Hugh if he fails, Ethel in person, 2 sacks barley otherwise. People believe boots more than they believe promise. A page with linen cuffs 2 clean strays over the cord. Down, you sign, fist low, he retreats before he invents a rule about himself. A housecarl palms a peg like a period so everyone knows the sentence is finished. You hang a mint sprig on the rail where the next mouth will need it more than noise. A lord tries to sail a goat through a tally. My ground was set feet, you say in the court voice. Breathe, count. He blinks at you like a man who has never been told he owns a throat. Count, you repeat, and a reeve next to him counts hens on his fingers. 1 at market, 1 eaten by fox, 1 paid. The goats vanish. An ink pot tips. Someone colored an outrage too hard. You slide your wrist under the flood and save the line that counts. Quit rent, tallage, hens, malt, amercements. 3 strokes drown. Your head writes them back while your hand blots and your mouth moves 2 benches with finger signs. Step, hold. So the cord stays an idea instead of a rope. Provost, someone murmurs. He appears with a small book that wants to be a conscience and boots that would prefer tile to rushes. Inspection, he says, rehearsed, eye on the cord as if the word makes lines true. Let him through and you stir gossip, they're cooking the count. Bar him and he leaves with the same sentence salted. Either way, the tide of names won't wait. You draw a peg tip across the seam, threshold only, and hand him the fine slate, posted, read. Vinegar first. He leans, finds dew and chalk, no theater, and becomes furniture. The treasurer calls, Lammas Tallage, Lord of Owlcroft. The lord rises like a thunderhead. The steward raises a brow. You walk the seam so your boots show him where breath goes. He sees the barred distraints list under your bracer and decides goats are tired. He pays hens. You chalk a tick under tallage paid and 1 under facts, which is not a column on the board but is in your head. Staff rap when measure keeps itself. The hush horn peals once and finds a pitch the room can carry. You stamp the footing again at the outside ring where someone will try to plant heels too far back. You hang the blade band lower on the rail. A man whose habit kept a knife in his palm reads it without admitting he did. Facts become sounds. Peg taps, roll thud on the board. Pounce on parchment like snow, hush horns low order, staff rap small thunder, split tally kissing. You log arrears, amercements, tallage, hens and malt on the steward's slate until the line of chalk looks like a spine. The reeve who muttered earlier tries 1 last sentence. Rolls lie. You point at the split tally halves beside each other, 1 in the chest, 1 in Hugh's hand, matching like ribs that mean breathing. Count, you tell him. He does. He shuts up. If it were your hall, if a reeve said rolls lie, how would you set the hush cord at first light, nearer for bite or wider for safety? Put your vote and where you're watching from below. I read them when the ochre flakes from my knuckles and the hush horn asks whether the cord belongs on the rushes again. You pace the quiet seam once more. Pegs sit like tame teeth. The cord holds without being pulled. The board says accounts, not arguments in letters elbows can't ignore. The bread salt is lighter. The vinegar coins are heavier. The treasurer's eye leaves your cord hand only when you hang the knife band where hands have to see it to itch. The horn will say, call names again in a breath. You breathe. You let someone else do the rest the way the line taught them. Set feet, breathe, count. The rest of the morning can argue about goats. Your job was to make the numbers speak. Dew settles on the rushes and tries to own the floor. The hush cord is cold in your palm. Pegs knock a little tune your wrist knows by heart. Routine is the law that teaches courage to stay civil. Before sun, peg the lane. Tap, tap, turn, tap. Run the cord true. No swales for pride to pool in. No proud humps for stories to trip over. Pounce the first membrane. Ground shell sifted soft over parchment so ink will bite where truth must stick. Chalk 2 rings at the rail. 1 at 2 paces for mouths that think volume is weight. 1 tight to the board for hands that need somewhere to stop. At the horn, caller reads, reeve answers, hush. At the mark read, post arrears count, pace to sureties, how many boots stand behind each breath, how much barley stands behind each name. At lull, split tallies, notch, and set by. Swap frayed hush straps for waxed. Saturday slack is dead, dry strap first keeps hands from blaming weather for their tremble. You string a laundry rope between uprights to air spare cloaks. Nobody gets to say cold made them rude. You draft the rota in neat chalk. Hush staffs forward, one per seam to wrap measure kept into elbows, name runners to lanes, fast feet to fetch the next man before his anger has time to invent a speech. Reserves to the door to widen on order. They will pretend boredom now and be grateful when boredom becomes space. Your job sits on your knuckles. Set the calling sequence. Tie colored threads on sticks where a glance will do the work of a speech. White for quit rent, blue for immersement, yellow for seed grains spared. Your ledger opens and learns 4 verbs again: pegged, called, heard, set by. The steward's stylus whispers them into wax as if numbers are talismans. Peg taps. Roll thud on board. Wax blocks thud as straps remember their work. The hush horn peals its low mark. Breath before speech, the note that gives truth a spine. The day pretends it is learned. It isn't. The provost arrives with a small book that wants to be a conscience and boots that prefer tile to rush. Inspection, he says, rehearsed, eyes on the cord as if the word makes lines true. Let him through and you stir gossip, they're cooking the count. Bar him and he leaves with the same sentence salted to taste. Either way, the tide of names won't wait. You drag a peg tip across the seam, threshold only, and hand him your fines slate. Posted, read. Vinegar first. He leans, sees dew and chalk and no theater and becomes furniture. Some morning always tips an inkpot. Today it chooses your fines book. You jam your wrist under the flood and save the line that counts. Arrears marked, immersements owed, vinegar coins promised. 3 strokes drown. Your head writes them back while your hand blots and your mouth moves 2 benches with finger signs. Step, hold down, so the cord stays an idea instead of a rope. 2 benches swap places. Habit outruns instruction. You redress the ring in shadow while a lantern crawls closer, half files trade, a sleeve tug, a palm down. The cord remains true, the hush keeps pretending it planned this. The treasurer's staff raps once for measure kept and twice when a laugh tries to become a rule. The caller reads in a voice built for patience. Godric of Mere, White Stick. Quit rent, hens and malt. Godric steps to the outer ring. Paid 1 hen, malt half. You notch the tally, the steward matches the split and nods. Elfrida, yellow. Seed spared at Martinmas. You chalk it where it will be remembered in spring. Born, blue. Immersement for grazing geese in the common oats. He opens his mouth to aim a goat at a number. You hold up a hand. Set feet, breathe, count. He counts and discovers the board prefers arithmetic. Wax blocks scuff as hush straps get rubbed sensible again. Dry strap first, you hear from a bench you weren't near. A good rule travels without you having to carry it. Corruption keeps its old clothes. A porter sidles behind a pillar and offers extra heads closer seats to a lord with a mouth like a trout. Your look performs subtraction on his fingers. He learns to count to 0. A cousin waves a folded open by order for nearer cord. The seal smells like pocket. You flatten it with your palm until it remembers paper is furniture, not command. The second, secret slate in your coat burns like a small coal. 3 lords who never pay water paws after their 3rd round. You erase 1 name because last night he took yellow without making you hunt him. The other 2 you carry into tomorrow like a thorn you intend to pluck when you've earned the grip. Mark Reed, the horn says. You post arrears count on the board where elbows have to see it to sit. Hens owed. 7, malt. 3.5, blue fines. 2 vinegar. Seed spared. 4. You pace to the surety's bench and chalk the boots behind each name. People believe boots more than they believe promise. A friar palms you a chit from the alderman. Wax attempting to turn favor into law. Open by order, the face lies. Nearer cord for a certain bench, the whisper means. You put it in the drawer that kills paper gently. Then tie a yellow thread round the nearest reed as a private joke your conscience approves. The reeve who muttered rolls lie yesterday comes to the ring with a white stick and a goat half ready. You point at the split tally halves matching like ribs and ask count? He does. He shuts up. The treasurer's eye leaves your cord hand for the first time today. You let your knuckles enjoy it. If the provost wanted inside the cord to quiet rumor, would you let him inside inspection or keep him threshold only? Put your vote and where you're watching from below. I read them when the pounce dust washes from my fingers and the hush cord asks whether it belongs on the rushes again. By mid-morning, the routine has trained the room. Pegs sit like tame teeth. The cord hums with attention, not appetite. The roll thuds, the tally kisses, the board keeps its mouth polite. You scrawl your 4 verbs one last time, pegged, called, heard, set by, and look down the quiet seam you chalked at first light. Men carry their breath to the rail like it was a thing they were proud of not spilling. The goats have gone back to being goats. The numbers speak. Frost kisses the audit rail. Thaw wakes under the rushes. Ink in the horn sulks and sits until you warm it with your palm. You roll wax between thumb and forefinger for a hush strap that stiffened in the night. You nick a clogged quill until the nib sighs into duty. Then you put your heel into yesterday's seam. It lies politely, top firm, under soft. The hall intends to be both treacherous and reasonable. At the gate, a market man rents his throat to a rumor. Captains forgiven, widows squeezed. He tries it 3 ways to see which buys him nods. The warden does not answer him. He sets his palm on the bench cord as if quiet could be nailed down. Warden's peace at the cordon, he says, and then to you. Orders that make your wrists honest. Demonstration without spectacle. Move the cord in the open. First account at the novice bench. Chalk fresh on the board, firm here, danger there. No blades near parchment where boots must see it. From the chapel door the sacrist adds what your shoulders already knew, no clatter, mass. Your morning becomes a shuttle of small courtesies. Bench cord, audit board, surety table, back and forth until the rushes decide they are being watched. You cradle a bundle of split tallies under canvas so they don't look like theater. You peg where the frost stayed loyal, ease where the thaw began to lie, stamp the seam yourself so the first boot won't be surprised. You pull the cord out in a shallow arc and pin it straight while everyone looks. Geometry calms men faster than speeches. Then the choice that buys you critics either way. Post the cord shift first. Clean, visible arithmetic. And townsmen cry favoritism, see captains get firm, widows get far. Post the rotation first, needier, fair, and the captain fumes. You're teaching people their place matters more than their form. Meanwhile, if a passerby spies blue thread immersement sticks in your bundle, he'll shout cheat instead of rule. You pick your order. Path first, promise second. Cord moved in the open, rotation posted immediately after. Blue sticks hung last and in daylight, under a strip that says immersements only when read. A clerk from the captain's table arrives with a rota torn down the spine by a thumb that wanted to be a palm. Paste, thread, the little iron he keeps under his cuff against 6 rules and a superstition. You hold a corner. He stitches the day back together. When the iron thinks about performing, the sacrist glances over and murmurs no clatter, and the iron learns to whisper. The hush horn peels its low mark. Peg taps quiet themselves. The warden keeps his hand on the rope but does not pull, he lends it patience, not weight. You chalk the public board by the bar, firm here, danger there in a hand that refuses drama. Beneath, 2 columns, the council learned last tide to count, entries read and strays arrested words over the line. Ticks, 1 under read, novice bench, liessa, bridge toll. 1 under strays, Orm shouted across the seam and met the staff rap for measure kept. You push the band where boots must see it to sit, no blades near parchment. The cellarer hisses move at a knot of shoulders that thought they were a conversation. A boy at the outer ring sags at the hush, breath getting ahead of courage. You steady his elbow with your sleeve and tap his shoulder twice. Set feet, breathe. Count, you give him the pocket drill in a seam meant for quiet, not heroics. He nods at the chalk ring 2 paces back and forgives his own throat. The first account lands where it should. Lisa, novice bench, cloak mended with 3 colors of thread, steps to the ring and bows to the tally, not the room. The usher reads, bridge toll, 2 farthings returned or 1 hen by Martinmas. The roll thuds on the board like a gavel that likes arithmetic. The steward kisses pounce on the membrane. Powder eats grease, ink bites truth. A lord with a trout mouth inhales to test his line about captains forgiven. Staff rap, measure kept. Your chalk adds a tick under entries read. and draws a small ring at the rail where hands must stop. Blue thread sticks whisper from your bundle like temptation. You hang them last, in daylight, far enough from fingers to make theft look like an opinion rather than courage. A passerby opens his mouth for cheat. Rule, you say without moving your teeth, and the arithmetic supports you. A friar palms you a chit from the alderman, wax attempting to make favor into law. Opened by order, the face lies. Nearer cord for a certain bench, the whisper means. You slide it under the tally, where paper goes to learn patience until it dies of it. You tie a yellow thread round the nearest reed as a private joke your conscience approves. The apothecary shuffles along the cord and sells a sentence. Peas and felt save bowels. Mint saves mouths. Vinegar saves ink. He is right often enough to be tolerated. You dab vinegar at the quill's throat and watch sulk become work. A priest catches chalk sigils blooming on the rail and says, "No charms. Device, not charm." You note in your book and wipe the marks off with rosemary water. The rail smells like restraint. The market man tries his myth again. Captains forgiven, widows squeezed. You let him watch the cord you moved and the rotation you posted. Lisa first, the captain's clerk mid-order, the lord with trout mouth last. You say nothing. Demonstration without spectacle does the talking. The council bell lifts a hush, even the gulls respect. You read the board aloud for the edge of the crowd that pretends letters are for other men. Firm here, danger there. Entries read, 1. Strays arrested, 1. Sureties for good order at mid-bell. No blades near parchment here. A herald's trumpet slices rising talk into pieces too small to hire. 2 benches try to trade places. Habit outruns instruction. You redress the ring in shadow while a lantern crawls closer, a sleeve tug, a palm down, a quiet hold for the one who thinks volume counts as measure. The cord remains true. The tide of names keeps pretending it planned this. The treasurer's eye leaves your cord hand only when the steward raises the first split tally. 1 half in the chest, 1 in Lisa's palm, notches kissing like ribs that mean breathing. Count, you tell the Lord who still prefers goats to numbers. He does. He shuts up. You keep walking the seam with wax in one hand and chalk in the other. Rosemary sprig, tucked under the board, to keep hands sweet, the kitchen said, finds its work. Vinegar coins clink into the steward's ladle. Chests of fines will groan into the cart at noon. The room's noise decides to be useful. If it were your hour, if the warden ordered demonstration without spectacle, what posts first? Cord first or rotation first? Put it in where you're watching from below. I read them when the pounce dust washes from my fingers and the hush cord asks whether it belongs on the rushes again. By mid-morning, the proof looks like furniture. Cord where eyes watched it be moved. Novice bench first. Blue sticks hung last and honest. The board says firm here, danger there, and nobody pretends not to read. The hush horn peals, names are called, rolls speak. The hall decides to behave. Torches gutter, and make the hall look smaller than it did at noon. Gates bar with that elbow-deep clunk that ends the day whether anyone agrees. Word keeps its own hours and hires a chorus as it slips past the cord. Crooked quills, favored rolls. The square likes a rhyme when it thinks it was cheated of a nearer reading. Inside, the hall meets by candle to do what halls are for. Turn mockery into policy. The beetle taps your plank twice with the stick that believes it writes law. Copy fair, copy fast, flawless. You square the sheet. The quill behaves because your hand has learned not to consult your feelings. Public notice. Quiet passage to and from the cord. You write it where boots must read before mouths can improvise. Alms fines for broken pegs and barred boasts. Novice bench dressed first. On paper, orders to post days' range, wind, and seed grain spared tallies at dawn so rumor wakes up unemployed. You leave small doors the town needs to breathe. Save collapse, save fever, save order under strain. Sand hisses. The line goes matte. Before it dries, a flare blooms in the shed. Orange climbs faster than sense. You and 2 boys are already moving. Buckets find your hands as if they were born there. Wet wool hisses on embered planks. The line at the outer bar forgets its lyrics long enough to watch flame learn manners. Rosemary and vinegar go back to their quieter work of smelling like discipline. Back at the plank, the beetle plants a knuckle in your margin. A small slip slides under your thumb with the practiced innocence of a profitable sin. Keep this quiet, the neat hand says. You tuck it under the ledger, and rest your palm until paper remembers filing is a kind of death. Omit it forever. Your bone tells your nerve. Your nerve sits. A coin rings on your plank and refuses to shine. The dead carrier's sister stands there with shoulders like broom handles and a voice built to carry 5 words. Leave the seed alone. Not loud. Truer than the jeer outside. You point your pen at the clause that teaches exceptions not to breed and write what the hall needed to learn. Seed grain spared in frost and foul wind. Distraint only on clear novice bench for seed cases first. The beetle coughs at the line that will cost him a friend. You keep the curve of the S steady as if dignity could be written into vowels. Under the guest air, a trap yawns. Men step down with private purses and come up with lighter pockets and better stories. Extra pegs, extra lines. A porter has discovered he likes counting with his palm. You lift the hatch with a peg just enough to count and close it on a promise your shoulder can pay for in the morning. 2 more pegs gone than posted. 2 fewer lines returned than sworn. The cellarer's hand lands on your shoulder with the weight of a nail. Make it wood, his thumb says. You nod. Boards can learn policy. You carry the fresh notice to the bar. Key rings, stacked like teeth on the bailiff's belt chatter, when the cartwheel squeals its old grievance and then purrs after someone shames it with grease. You nail the paper where hands can't pretend they weren't told. A drum under the board gives the words a spine. Suspense settles behind you like a gull. If the jeers aren't answered, the outer bar will try to be a song. If you answer wrong, your name slides onto the stone the clerk keeps oiled, to be silenced. Either way, the queue of names won't wait. Tomorrow's dawn needs a script more than you need applause. Inside, tallies of peg amercements line up under your pencil. Recognizances with awkward crosses shiver into the docket. Some firm, some sideways. Some made by hands that prefer tools to pens. Rosemary and vinegar steam lift the room's patience a half-inch. The astrologer drifts in, declares the hour lucky if men stop talking, then pushes the lucky hour forward with his thumb when clouds thicken. Nobody pays him. He pretends the sky did. A patron's runner offers a folded chit with wax that confuses polish for law. Open by order, it claims, chin high at your margin. You lay it under the same palm that smothered the beetle's slip, and let paper learn to die politely. Now the contested name. It warms your pocket like a small stove. A lord whose cousin stands too often beneath the arch with the steward expects the close chord rotation as if it were inheritance. He doesn't belong there. Another name does. The widow whose plea taught the tiny king to listen yesterday. The reeve whose water paws steadied 3 benches. Erase or obey. Unlock or relock. You lay the bad name on the plank over the rosemary tack and let friction pretend to be fate. You set him aside. You write the other in a hand the town has learned to trust and punish. Your handwriting is where mercy lives. The square will teach you later what it costs to be recognized by your letters. The beetle's cough finally locates the line that will make him defend you to men who look like his friends. The warden signs with the letter that doesn't blush. The treasurer scans the page, prefers arithmetic to adjectives, and nods toward the board. A friar palms you a chit from the alderman. You let him watch you file it in the drawer where paper goes to learn that patience is fatal. You return to the trap and ask the dark for arithmetic. Extra pegs, extra lines. The porter's smile loses a tooth. You count again. 2 more gone than posted. 2 fewer returned than sworn. The cellarer's thumb presses your shoulder like a promise with hardware. Make it wood. You nod. Morning will learn carpentry. The outer bar leans again, and a herald's trumpet cuts the sound into obedient pieces. You read the notice aloud, because policy grows up when it hears itself. Quiet passage. Alms fines for broken pegs and barred boasts. Novice bench dressed first. Range, wind, and seed spared at dawn. The marketman tests favored rolls one last time and watches the board ignore him like old wood ignores adjectives. If it were your plank, if a sister's coin rang dull where your sand still dried, if a patron's slip asked your margin to forget itself, If a name in your pocket insisted on warmth it hadn't earned, what would you write, omit, or obey? Put it, and where you're watching from below. I read them when the pounce dust washes from my fingers, and the hush chord asks whether it belongs on the rushes again. You knot the notice where the drum can keep it company. You file the coin in the dish that will be the only place tonight where money does what it's told. You file the chits in the drawer that kills them softly. You leave the contested name where rosemary can keep it from sticking to your hand again. You bank the brazier. Torches gutter. Gates bar. The hall smells like ink that decided to be honest and smoke that learned restraint. Outside, a town is learning quiet rules by cord and chalk instead of knives. That is the price of truth on paper, and the tide will keep the bargain. Dawn unlatches the hall. Trumpets wet their lips. Drums remember yesterday's beat and hand it back to a room that hasn't earned music yet. The velvet voice climbs its crate by the bar and nails the hour to the cord. His Grace commends those who kept quiet order at the cord and board. Ranges are chalked because a bargain in ink said they must. Windows stand open not from virtue, but because a rule learned how to turn air into policy. The brazier glows the way a good tool glows, only because the order allowed it, not because anyone needs to admire it. The market man with the myth strides past the rail free as air, trying out a new sentence on the light and deciding to save it for a paying crowd. A midwife's lintel wears a yellow tag instead of red. Someone wrote the exception, and someone else obeyed it. Near the steps a widow folds to the cobbles. Two strangers make a chair of their hands and lift her as if the town had rehearsed it, which it has. The velvet voice finishes the page. People accept being commended because it cost them nothing at this hour. Your errands carry edges. You are final witness and courier of consequences. First duplicate to the sheriff, quiet passage to and from the cord, alms fines for broken pegs and barred boasts, novice bench dressed first, day's range, wind, and seed-spared tallies to be posted at dawn. He signs with a letter that doesn't blush and gives you the small look you've been earning all week. I saw. Second to the captain, the dry rota, the seam stitched by the clerk's little iron, the tally, entries read, strays arrested. Arithmetic she prefers to adjectives. She nods and spares you both a speech. Third to the guild, hung where money pretends to learn manners, a snowfall of paper that settles dust without cleaning blood. Over yesterday's shut-ups for false oath, a muster sheet for the king's levy is pinned, wide as appetite. Names bud at the lower edge where pride and debt keep their appointment. You finally understand what account rolls bought. Not glamour, but obedience. Not luxury, but lanes that move, bellies steady, roofs that don't leak, and a harvest of men promised for later, because a straight cord is useful to more than trials. The dry rota hangs over the board, close cord, far cord, dry strap first, with the calm you wished for last week. Vinegar coins clink in ladles at the chest, chests of fines groan into carts and purr after somebody shames the wheels with grease. A parchment marked misadventure for a slip at wet flags goes into the docket. A lie with a warm heart that keeps the morning cheap. The last rosemary bundle smolders to ash. The priest who warned off charms chalked on the rail watches it die, and decides to respect devices publicly for a week. Then your coat remembers it has a drawer. The secret slate of spared arrears. 3 cotters whose seed you left in their bins because Frost wrote a better argument than any Reeve. The side list of distraints you halted against orders in the dark hour when Thaw lied under Frost, and sense outranked command. Leak, burn, or file. You hold both like hot bread. Leak would be honest and brief. You would be too. It would splash in the square like a good sin and die when nobody could afford to adopt it. Burn would be quick and teach you nothing but how to run colder. File is the story this corner survives by. Proof where questions with hats can find it, nowhere near mouths with errands. You slide slate and list into the drawer under the ledger, and listen for the click that promises a better hour will be allowed to ask you why. File. The steward finds you the way enamel always does. He offers a badge to mark more wisely, as if clarity were a party trick you refuse to perform. The guildmaster occupies the shade near your shoulder and offers sanctuary till the pest passes, the sort of dangerous kindness that fits under a cloak. The sheriff passes and gives you what he does best in your direction, not nothing, Not much. I saw. You answer all three with what you own. Keys, cord, brazier, silence. Hear your wrists say. You keep your post. Public reading by the bar begins again, because velvet loves threes. The drum puts a spine under the notice. The captain's clerk flits in to finger the knot on the rota, decides it will hold and vanishes before the market man can hire his breath. The sacrist rubs his palm along the church door and decides the wood can keep quiet without supervision. The cellarer hisses move at a shadow out of habit. A runner from the alderman tries you with a new chit. Open by order, the wax whispers in a humbler tone than yesterday's. You rest it under your palm and let your hand decide. Omit. You chalk a dot on your wrist to remind yourself who deserves your braver voice later, the widow whose seed you spared, and the reeve whose boots you counted instead of his story. Rules are supposed to keep people alive, not busy. If you had to choose, soft under a patron's livery or hard under sanctuary eaves, what keeps you whole, livery or sanctuary? Put it, and where you're watching from below. I count them after the last pounce dust leaves my fingers, and the cord asks whether it belongs on the rushes again. By noon, the extracts have turned into furniture. People lean on them and forget the time when paper had to prove itself. The levy clerk learns to keep his line moving without explaining his face. The market man tests a fresh myth and discovers grief has better ears than appetite. The board holds. The cord stays true. The roll warms from hands, not iron. The line breathes without you needing to give it a mouth. Justice, this week, was airflow and cord budget. Mercy was policy, not indulgence. Survival was choreography of chalk, pegs, split sticks, and staves, performed by people who don't need to be sung about to do it again. You were the hinge. You coil the slack. You pocket the keys. You bank the brazier. The horn will say call, the hush horn will say hush, and the cord will mean count. The tide will keep its bargain if you keep yours.